Oh, hey, I'm Lindy Cohen. I'm a dietitian, I'm a nutritionist, I'm a mum, and I'm also pregnant. So if you're in first trimester, then there's a very good chance that you're experiencing some nausea, which is referred to as morning sickness, which is a lie because morning sickness means that it happens in the morning. And from my experience, this kind of nausea lasts all day, or it could strike at any time. We're going to talk about it now because I think one of the things that can often happen is that your appetite goes from quite varied and then you fall pregnant and suddenly all you feel like eating is bread, plain bread, and like plain pasta. And it can feel really overwhelming because there's another part of your brain that's thinking, well, I should be eating this really perfect looking diet and I'm not. And so we're going to work through this because nausea is something that is solvable. I will put a disclaimer out there that there's a certain level of nausea that is expected in pregnancy and is kind of means that you can still function. It might mean you can still eat some foods and you can still have enough energy to get around. If you're noticing that your nausea is so intense, so debilitating that you can't eat food properly, that you can't go to work if you need to go to work, then go speak to your doctor or a midwife because there's things that can be done for that. You don't have to struggle through it. But there are some strategies that we can use if you aren't noticing some of this nausea happening. So let's talk about it. So one of the things that can happen with nausea in pregnancy is that if you don't eat for a long time, or even a little bit of time, the nausea will increase. So it's kind of counterintuitive because the more hungry you get, the more nauseous you get, and the last thing you feel like doing is actually eating some food. And it's almost like a mental struggle to remind yourself, okay, what I need to do right now is actually eat something, and that's what's going to remove the nausea. I had to remind myself that many times before I sat down to a meal. The last thing I felt like doing was putting food into my mouth, but I knew that if I wanted to stop feeling nauseous, that was one of the things that I needed to do. What we want to try and do as well is avoid that nausea from coming on and becoming that intense. The longer you leave gaps between meals, probably the more intense the nausea is going to get. So instead of having 3 main meals a day like you might normally do, or having big gaps between main meals, we want to try and get into more of, a snacking habit. And that might mean that we're having a main meal and then you're having 1 or 2 snacks in between so that we're trying to keep that nausea at bay so it doesn't actually accumulate and get so big and bad that we actually feel like eating nothing at all. I will say about nausea as well is some days it will be really intense and some days you might wake up and there is no nausea. Sometimes it can make you feel really worried that there is something going on, but I spoke to many of my friends and people in my baby group and everyone had a similar experience. So just knowing that nausea can come in waves and peaks and troughs is really, really helpful. If you are noticing that you are nauseous, then what I want you to do is write a list, get a pen and paper or your phone, and we're going to write a list of the foods that you are willing to eat, okay? And you can start simple. You can go, well, bread, I'm willing to eat bread. I'm willing to eat pasta. You can start there. But then let's try and think, beyond that. So I wrote this list when I was in first trimester, and I'm going to read to you my list. Maybe it's going to help you think of some ideas of things that you are willing to eat at the moment. I was willing to have cherry tomatoes that were cold and fresh. I was willing to eat cucumber. Avocado was something I was willing to eat, though the idea of lettuce did not appeal to me at all. I was willing to eat cooked eggs, though I've heard that some people really don't like the idea of cooked eggs at all. I was okay to have, of course, toast and pasta, but I was also okay to have things like pasta sauce, tomato sauce. I was happy to eat cheese. Once you have your list of things that you are willing to eat, I want you to let go of this idea of perfect eating. So I think so often in nutrition, especially in pregnancy, there's a lot of preconceptions about like, well, I'm pregnant, I means I have to eat even better than I normally eat, and yet my appetite's gone, my nausea is like totally taking control, and it means that I'm not eating that well at all. What we want to try and do is let go of that idea because that doesn't help us do anything. It creates a sense of food guilt. It makes us more inclined to feel crappy about ourselves, and we don't need any more of that. Instead, I think a very useful idea is to start to count nutrition wins. What do I mean by this? All right, let's say that you're only willing to eat a piece of toast. Can that toast be a whole grain piece of toast? If so, that's a nutrition win. And when it comes to all the things that you're battling, things like nausea, you got to take those nutrition wins. Now we have our piece of toast. Well, would you be willing to have some peanut butter on that piece of toast? If so, that's a nutrition win. We're getting protein, we're getting healthy fats. Awesome. Now, another option would be, would you eat avocado? Well, there's another alternative. Now we're getting a source of healthy fats and we're getting some fruit. To this meal, would you be willing to have a handful of cherry tomatoes? If you are, then suddenly we've built ourselves this really healthy meal. And so we don't have to focus on all the things that we're doing wrong, but what I want you to do is count those good and positive things that you are doing. Let's say you are you're willing to have some yogurt. Can you add a handful of nuts and seeds? You don't even have to add it to the yogurt. You can just eat it separately, because that's one of the things with nausea as well. Sometimes combining the foods together makes it harder to eat. So the idea of being confronted by a big salad with all the ingredients mixed in and like this very intense salad dressing can just be too much. So what you might want to try and do is get a plate and put the ingredients separately on the plate. This allows you to stick with more simple flavors and not get overwhelmed by how much food you're about to, have to eat. I will also say that having, smaller plates of food might actually mean that you are less daunted by the idea of eating this big, overwhelming plate of food. Another thing to keep in mind is that hot food smells a lot more intensely than cold food. And I know for myself, when I was in first trimester, all the smells in the house or anything really punchy was just way too overwhelming. So we want to try, if we can, reduce those smells if it is making you nauseous. And a simple way to do that is actually to rely on some of those colder foods. So as I suggested, things like a piece of avocado on toast, you can kind of do that anytime, or even if it's just a piece of bread because the smell of toast is too intense, that's absolutely fine. I think we have this idea as well that there are breakfast foods, lunch foods, and dinner foods. But if it means that you're going to get some whole grain muesli at dinner time with some milk, that's actually a nutrition win. And so don't get locked into that thinking of going, oh, I have to have, what I normally have. You have to be flexible at this time, just remembering that the most important thing for your baby is that it's actually getting fuel. Your baby is still going to turn out fine provided you're getting energy inside you. There is no room for perfect eating. All we're going to do right now, we're going to record the foods that we actually are willing to eat, and we're going to count those small nutrition wins, because all of these tiny nutrition wins are going to add up to something really big, and they're going to help you get through your nausea through this first trimester.
And I know it can be so overwhelming to know what you can and can't eat when you're pregnant. That's why I've created a free downloadable pregnancy food list, which you can download for free by clicking the link below. And I've also linked some free pregnancy workouts for you, because fitting in that time to move your lovely body can be tricky. Of course, you can follow me on Instagram. That's where I share a whole bunch of free tips and recipes, which are guaranteed to be free of nutrition nonsense. I hope you love this video, and if you do, click subscribe, and I'd love to see you again.